Hey guys, welcome to tonight's channel where stories of wind, snow, and wanderers of the polar lands are lit by breath and memory. Tonight, I want to tell you about one man, the wanderer of the polar wastes, a traveler moving through blizzards and darkness, carrying goods, news, and things humanity no longer dares to believe in. In a land where snow hides the sky and death waits behind every gust of wind, he keeps walking, not for glory, not for gold, but because there are roads that, if no one takes them, the world will forget the way home. Before we begin, do one small thing: turn down the lights, pull your blanket close, pour yourself a cup of hot tea or cocoa, and let the warmth around you melt into this voice. If you love lonely journeys, stories that carry the chill and the heartbeat of humankind within the white night, don't forget to hit subscribe so we can meet again on other nights in faraway places. And hey, where are you watching from? Is it late night in the city or early morning in the cold? Tell me so the wind tonight knows where to find you. Listen, do you hear that? The wind. It's not the kind that hums between city buildings, not the thin draft brushing past your window. This is real wind, the kind that lives in faraway lands where earth and sky melt into one white expanse and nothing exists but snow. Imagine standing there, your boots sinking into deep ice, your breath turning to smoke that vanishes in front of you, and every step breaking the frozen ground with a sharp crack. Close your eyes for a moment. Let's walk together, shall we? Together through this endless snowfield, where there is nothing but wind and heartbeat. In the distance, the mountains rise like the jagged teeth of some ancient beast, silver grey beneath the cold moon, and beneath our feet lies a road no one remembers by name. The wind here doesn't blow from one direction. It comes from everywhere, clawing at your face, slipping down your collar, threading through your bones. Can you hear it? That howl as if it's calling someone's name, or maybe just echoing its own loneliness through the frozen valley. Every gust here carries the memory of someone who got lost, and tonight, we're just one of them. We walk, searching for signs of life in a place the world has forgotten. Beneath our feet, the ice is so hard it mirrors the moonlight, and you can see your shadow twisted and long, like a lost soul wandering. Sometimes a stronger gust sweeps through, scattering the fine snow. And in that instant, everything disappears. No earth, no sky, only a white sea swallowing us whole. But don't be afraid. Keep walking. You're not alone. There's another out here. A man the northern folk call by a name made of wind. The one who walks through storms. I want you to meet him. We'll follow his tracks, faint marks winding through the ice like unfinished words written by winter itself. He doesn't move fast. No one can, in this place. Every step is a choice to live or to fall, to move forward or turn back. The cold here doesn't kill right away. It steals warmth piece by piece, as if testing whether you still want to live. But the one who walks through storms keeps going. He carries a small oil lantern, its flame so faint you can't tell if it's real or just a trick of the fog. Yet that tiny light has guided him across hundreds of frozen miles through ice forests, through places no map dares to mark. They say he travels not just to trade goods, but to connect lands torn apart by blizzards. A messenger of life in a world ruled by death. Can you picture it in the cutting cold that bites through skin? A lone figure trudging forward, a pack over his shoulder, an ice blade at his hip, and in his heart, only one command: never stop. Because here, in the polar wastes, if you stop, you'll hear the wind whisper your name, and if you listen too long, you'll forget who you are. Listen closely, because when you listen long enough, you'll realize the wind isn't just sound. It's memory, the soul of everyone who's ever walked here. Every storm is a story. Every snowflake, a fragment of someone's ashes. And tonight, as we walk together, you'll see those spirits are still here, watching the wanderer and us. The deeper we go, the southern light fades away. Only the moon remains, cold as steel, sliding over the ice like shards of shattered glass. Beneath each step, the ground trembles not from the wind, but from something moving far below the frozen crust. Slow, very slow. But don't worry, it's not time to fear yet. This is only the beginning. This wind, this path, is an invitation. And ahead lies the place the one who walks through storms has reached, the place even the strongest dare not go. There, Life and death are separated by a single breath, so keep your breath steady. Don't let it freeze. Because as we step deeper into this endless white, we're not just chasing his story, we're searching for the answer to a question the snow has always asked. How much of us is ice, and how much is fire? If there is a place where time stands still, it is the polar region. Here, day and night can no longer be told apart, for the sun is only a pale blur on the horizon, while the darkness drapes over everything like a thick, breathing shroud. Colour has no place here, only white, grey, and at times, the faint blue reflection of moonlight on the ice. The whole world feels forgotten, so still and silent that even your own breath sounds like a sin. The snow here does not fall like the soft flakes of warm winter days. It falls heavy, dense, and loud, as if every flake were a shard of glass striking another. It doesn't melt, but piles upon itself, layer after layer, creating hills without peaks and valleys without bottoms. Beneath your feet, the ice is smooth and hard, as if someone poured molten glass and let it freeze in an instant. The wind never stops. It blows from the north, then shifts, then circles back again, as though it too has lost its way in the land of its birth. The sound of the wind here is more than sound. It has form, weight, and soul. As it sweeps by, snow rises into long white ribbons, twisting like enormous serpents of frost, slithering over mountains and forests before dissolving into nothing. Within each gust is the scent of iron, of stone ground down by cold, and sometimes the faint tang of old frozen blood. There are stretches of snow that run endlessly to the horizon, where not a single branch or trace of life exists. Yet in some places, out of the boundless white, rise black stones, remnants of ancient volcanoes, standing like guardians over a vast frozen graveyard. When the wind passes through them, it makes a low moan, like a horn calling spirits home. Far away, shadows move, perhaps columns of ice, perhaps wild beasts, or perhaps something else, something that lived here long before humankind discovered fire. In the polar world, light doesn't shine, it drifts. The sun, if it appears at all, glides along the edge of the sky for a few short hours, painting the snow in pale gold before fading like a dying breath. And when night comes, the sky turns to black sea, where the aurora dances silken, spectral ribbons that shimmer and chill, illuminating each breath from a traveller's mouth. Under that light, everything blurs, half real, half dream. Sometimes you'll see the shape of a house, or a figure standing on a snowy ridge, but as you approach, it dissolves into wind and frost. There is no sound of life here, no birds, no flowing water. Only two things remain, snow and silence. But even silence is different here. It isn't peace, it's emptiness so vast that it forces you to hear yourself. Your heartbeat, your blood, your thoughts breaking apart. Those who return from the polar wastes say this: the cold doesn't kill, the silence does. Because when there's nothing left to hear but yourself, you begin to wonder if you're truly alive. At times, the snow changes colour. When the wind blows hard from the distant ice sea, it carries mineral dust that turns the snow blue, then silver. From afar, the ground looks like a colossal mirror reflecting the sky, tricking you into thinking you're walking between two heavens. And beneath that ice deep, far deeper than light can reach, lie things buried by time. Bones of giants, remnants of humankind, or perhaps things that never had a name. The locals believe every blizzard is a waking spirit, and when it passes, it steals the voice of anyone who dares to speak in its land. That's why people here live in silence, communicating with their eyes, lighting fires not for warmth, but to remind each other that light still exists. If you've ever stood in the polar night, you'd understand that this place isn't just cold, it's lonely enough to tire even fear itself. You'd see snowflakes fall slowly, spinning, as if searching for a place to rest. You'd realize every breath is an act of defiance, every step a challenge to death. And somewhere in that expanse, between the howling wind and cracking ice, there walks a lone figure, steady, unyielding, as if born from the storm itself. But that is his story, the story of the wanderer of the polar wastes. For now, we've only brushed the edge of his world, where snow has no end, and silence is the language of the earth and sky. In that endless white world, where every trace of humanity is erased with a single gust of wind, one figure still walks. A small black dot against the sea of snow, slow, silent, as if he doesn't belong to this world. He moves through the storm without bowing his head, his back slightly bent from the wind's force, his thick fur cloak sweeping from shoulder to heel, the tangled strands whipping in the air like lashes. No one knows where he came from, or where he's going. To those at the last southern outpost, he's known by a simple name more description than title, the one who walks through wind. That name wasn't his own. It spread through the mouths of those who live scattered between the snow stations, hunters, couriers, the ones who cross through death to connect what's left of the living world. They say, if you see someone walking through the storm without lowering his head, the oil lamp on his shoulder still burning no matter how fierce the blizzard that's him. He passes through nameless lands, leaving behind only footprints that vanish as soon as the snow begins to fall. It's said he never stays more than 3 nights in one place. Just when the fire has begun to warm, he throws on his cloak, checks the knife at his side, adjusts the lamp, and moves on. Some say he's a merchant, carrying goods across the frozen borders, rolls of hide, herbs, iron shards, dried salt, and sometimes messages between isolated tribes. Others claim he's a scout from a fallen kingdom, still clinging to an old duty in a world that no longer gives orders. And the more superstitious whisper that he's no longer human, that the one who walks through wind is a wandering spirit, a messenger born from the storm itself, walking so humankind doesn't forget they live within the heart of winter. Whatever the truth, no one denies he's still out there. Every storm season, when lost travelers' lamps go out one by one, a single light can still be seen moving across the white plains, slow, but never stopping. He's neither tall nor short, his frame lean but strong, his steps steady, unhurried, never lost. Beneath his wolfskin cloak, only his eyes are visible grey as the sky before a storm, reflecting light but never holding it. Those who've seen him say his gaze cuts through people not from coldness, but because it no longer seems to see with flesh and bone. Whenever he appears, snow seems to fall slower, the wind softens, and silence wraps around him like a second coat. Someone once asked if he feared the cold, and he only smiled. His smile made no sound, just a breath that turned to white mist before fading away. Under his cloak, he carries a large canvas satchel filled with everything a person needs to survive. Hard bread, salt, a few herbal remedies, tinder, and pieces of carefully sharpened metal. Each item is arranged as if it holds a purpose beyond use, as though he's done this for a very, very long time. They say he can start fire in the wind, draw water from ice, and read direction just by the motion of drifting snow. He understands the language of the wind, something only the ancient northern tribes once believed possible. Some nights, he's seen standing motionless in the open, eyes closed, listening. They say that's when he's speaking to the wind, asking which way the storm will turn tomorrow, or who will survive the night. When he passes through a village, he often leaves small bundles of supplies by the door, but never knocks. By the time anyone finds them, he's gone. Once, a snowfield child swore they saw him sitting on an ice slab, mending the torn coat of a fallen soldier, then placing it gently over the body, whispering, "Don't be cold anymore." The story spread, and from then on, people believed the one who walks through wind sows warmth back into the souls winter has taken. He speaks little, leaves nothing behind. Only the lamp on his shoulder, that small, stubborn flame the storm can never swallow, tells the world where he is. Some say it burns on whale oil, but others insist it burns on his own soul. True or not, no one dares to ask. In the polar lands, there are questions the wind will steal forever if spoken aloud. So they only say his name softly, afraid to disturb something sacred, the one who walks through wind. A name that needs no story, no legend, and yet, when spoken, everyone knows who it means. In this land where every trace is erased by snow, only his footsteps remain. And whenever someone asks, how does he survive out there, in the land of death? The answer is always the same, because he never stops. No one knows why he chose that work, the job others called madness, and yet he simply said, "If I don't go, they'll forget each other." In the polar lands, between icebound mountains and eternal snow forests, there are tribes scattered apart, separated by hundreds of miles of white nothingness. No roads, no maps, only the memories of those who once survived. He was the fragile thread connecting them, the one who carried goods, messages, and sometimes promises too heavy for others to send. On his shoulder hung a heavy satchel, furs hunted from the western tribes, dry salt from the east, small pouches of precious seeds, and letters wrapped in reindeer hide, sealed with tree resin, signed in blood because ink freezes on the road. Everything inside his bag meant life. In the polar world, a piece of cloth could be worth a human life. A spark could save an entire village. But more than goods, what he carried was news. In a place where the wind's voice is louder than man's, words are the rarest treasure. He brought news of death, of the hunt, of the storms to come, of a tribe that had moved, or simply the message, there are still people out there. Each time he reached a rest post, he never stayed long. He'd sit by the fire, set down his load, brush the frost off his shoulders, and trade words with the keeper in a rough, low voice, never more than 10 sentences. When asked if the road was safe, he always said, "If I'm still breathing, it's walkable." Then he'd rise, adjust the oil lamp, and disappear into the wind. For the northern people, his appearance meant hope. When the light of the one who walks through wind flickered in a storm, they knew the world was still connected, that they hadn't been left behind. Children would run out to see him, standing on mounds of snow, clutching scraps of fabric, shouting, "The man of the wind is here." And the grown would quietly leave dry meat or salt at their doors, gifts of thanks, unspoken. He never took coins, for money buys no warmth here. He only accepted things that could help someone live one more day. Each tribe had its own greeting, but all gave him the same look, not of awe, but of respect for one who had walked through what they dared not face. Because anyone who's crossed the frozen forest knows, there's more than snow and cold there. The ice forest is the land of the dead trees grown from stone, frozen for centuries. Trunks pale, leaves like glass, clinking when the wind moves through. Beneath the ice lie the bodies of those who tried to carve a path, now nameless statues of frost. But for him, it was the only road. He walked it like a musician, reading notes. Every crack, every gust, every chill had its rhythm. He followed the heartbeat, not direction. Each time he crossed the frozen woods, he carried something no one else noticed, a small bell tied at his side. It never rang, for snow muffles all sound, but whenever he stopped, he touched it, a ritual. Some said it was to call the wind, to tell it he still lived. Others said it was to tell the souls beneath the ice he was only passing through. With each stretch of the road, he carved a small mark on the trunk of an ice tree. Just a short horizontal line, meaningless to most, but those who came after would know. He's been here, and this path still breathes. Once, an old man in a northern tribe told a story that long ago, before the storms swallowed the sky, there were ice merchants, travelers who carried goods between tribes, living and dying on the road. When they died, people buried them in snow with their oil lamps, so their light could guide the next wanderer. Maybe the one who walks through wind was their last descendant, or just one of their lingering souls. Either way, he kept walking. Because if he stopped, not only he would die, but the people on both ends of the world would lose each other forever. In this frozen world, he was the final vein that kept humanity's heart beating. Some nights, he'd sit in the middle of the snowfields, open his satchel, and take out the letters, not out of curiosity, but out of fear that silence would kill them. He'd read them softly, so the wind could listen. A letter from a mother to her son at the northern post. "When you see the first snow, know that I'm still alive." Or a note from a blacksmith. "Trade this sword for bread, because you can't eat steel." Those fragile words he carried through the blizzards, through places where no voice could outlive a breath. And as the wind howled around him, he smiled, a rare, small smile, hidden in the cold. Because in the endless white death of the polar world, only the words people send to each other can keep them alive. And he, the one who walks through wind, was the one who carried those words to where they were meant to go, even if it meant walking through all of winter to do it. That morning, when the pale light of the sun was swallowed by the white mist, he stopped by a flat stretch of land where the wind seemed to blow from below. The snow there wasn't soft, it was hard as stone, its surface smooth and webbed with tiny cracks. He knelt, reached down, and touched it. It was so cold it felt alive. Then he saw it, a footprint, twice the size of his hand, deeper than any human or animal could make. The claws were sharp and long, curved like metal, 5 of them, slightly tilted to the left as if the thing that made them didn't walk by will, but by instinct. He stood still, scanning the horizon. The wind rose in bursts, blowing snow across the mark, erasing its edges but not the whole. That meant it was fresh. Very fresh. He pulled a dry blade of grass from his pouch, a rare thing that grew near the ice line, and tossed it onto the print. The grass lifted, fell, and the tip burned. The wind was freezing, yet the air sparked. Only one creature could warp the air like that. The northern snow wolf, the beast locals called by a name they never dared say aloud, the spirit of winter. He'd heard tales of them from old men around the fire. They weren't ordinary wolves, but beings born when the first storm of the world curled into itself and gave birth to a child made of wind. Their fur was white as salt, their eyes bright as the moon, and when they howled, the whole ice forest trembled. Some said, when winter is about to die, a snow wolf comes to take its breath away so spring can begin. But if the wolf appears while winter still lives, it means something has gone wrong. He looked ahead. The wind whipped his face, dragging ice shards that cut like blades. In the distance, through the thick white haze, something moved. Not a man, not a tree. A massive shape gliding in silence. He couldn't tell how far it was, only that the wind had changed. It was no longer the aimless breath of morning, but a heavy current, pulling toward a single unseen center. The northern wanderers had a rule they never forgot. When the wind stops singing, don't breathe. And now, the wind was silent. Completely. No howling, no snow flying, only his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Slowly, he stepped back, one hand gripping the lantern, the other resting on the ice blade at his hip. The faint light from the oil lamp flickered, sliding across the frozen ground and over his shadow, stretching it into something no longer human. In the distance, the snow cracked. A small, dry snap, echoing through the still air like a warning. He crouched, scooped up a handful of snow, and clenched it tight. It melted slowly, but the cold slid through his glove, crawling into his veins. He knew no human should be here right now. Still, he couldn't turn back. The storm behind had buried the road, and ahead, hell or not, was the only path to the northern post. He pulled his cloak tighter, lowered his hood, and walked on, careful to step around the fractured patches of ice. Beneath the clear surface, something moved dark, long shapes drifting like shadows under water. Each time the wind shifted, the ice trembled, as if something beneath it was breathing. A few times, he heard footsteps slow, steady, not his own. He didn't turn. Those who survive in the frozen lands know. When you hear something behind you, just keep walking. Turning only brings it closer. He climbed a ridge where black rocks jutted from the ice, the wind stronger now, the dim moonlight shining clearer. There, he found 3 more tracks arranged in a circle around a deep hollow. In the center lay the remains of a reindeer, the upper body torn apart, the flesh frozen mid-tear, the blood not yet black. His blade glinted not for fighting, but to reflect light, the only thing that made the beasts of the ice hesitate. He scattered a handful of dry salt around himself, whispering the nomad's prayer before crossing forbidden ground. If you hear me, let me pass. I come not to steal your breath. The wind answered softly, like a sigh on his neck. Then silence. He knew the wolf was near, but it didn't want to kill him. Not yet. Maybe because he'd crossed into its territory, or maybe because it was watching. The spirit of winter doesn't hunt for hunger, they say. It kills only when someone disturbs the stillness of the ice, when someone forgets this land doesn't belong to men. He moved on, his steps faint, stretching across the endless white. Each one carried the weight of unseen eyes. His shadow blended into snow, his oil lamp still burning, though the wind often leaned close enough to snuff it out. Then, at the edge of his sight, something shimmered. Not the light of the lamp, but 2 faint glowing points, motionless in the fog. Eyes, distant but unmistakable. They didn't blink. They didn't move. He stopped. His heart hammered, but his hands stayed steady. In this white world, there is only one truth. If you fear, the snow will hear, and the snow will swallow you. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and walked forward past those eyes as if through a mirage. When he opened them again, they were gone. And the wind blew once more, the snow fell again. The world breathed again as if nothing had happened. But in the darkness of the polar night, beneath the storms rising in the distance, a spirit had awakened, and it now knew his name. The storm came without a single sign. At first, it was only a few small gusts, swirling around his legs like playful children, then growing stronger, lifting waves of snow and swallowing the ground whole. In just a few short minutes, every direction disappeared. In front of him, there was no longer a forward or backward, only a thick, white void, so dense and cold, no light could pierce through. He tried to look around, but everything dissolved together, sky, earth, even his own breath. Each time he exhaled, the white vapor was torn apart by the wind, coiled up and vanished, as if the world was swallowing him piece by piece. He pulled his cloak tight, lowered his head, trying to guess his path by instinct. But in a blizzard, instinct is a traitor. Step left, thinking north, but one twist of the wind and direction was gone. Nothing stood still here, not even him. The wind screamed around his ears, howling like someone shouting near and far, real and unreal all at once. He stopped, tilted his head, trying to tell the difference. But the more he listened, the more the wind sounded like voices broken, distorted cries echoing from beneath the ice. "Don't listen," he told himself, clutching the oil lamp in his hand. The weak yellow light trembled violently. His shadow fell across the snow and was erased with a single gust. Each time the wind struck his face, it felt as if his skin split. But there was no blood, only cold. A cold that wasn't just on the skin, but inside, spreading from the heart outward, like someone gripping it with an icy hand. The wind made him stumble. Snow gathered on his shoulders, his back clinging to his hair, his eyelashes. Each blink brought flashes of blinding light, strange, white, unbearable, and then darkness again, as if the world only existed each time he opened his eyes. He tried to shout, but his voice broke apart in the storm, no more than a breath. His voice wasn't a voice anymore. Every other sound vanished, leaving only two rhythms, the wind and the heartbeat. The wind roared, the heart replied. A steady rhythm, echoing like a curse of the frozen land. In that moment, he realized silence here didn't mean peace. Silence in the snow was when the wind filled all space, leaving man alone with his fear. The feeling of isolation crept in, not from outside, but from within. He no longer knew how far he'd gone or where he was heading. Everything drifted. His legs felt like lead, moving without feeling. The ice beneath his boots cracked faintly, and sometimes it felt like walking on a frozen lake one step away from breaking through. But he had to keep moving. To stop was to die. The question was where. There was no north, no sun, no trees, no trail to follow. He tried to recall the direction of the first wind, the path he'd taken before the storm hit. But the wind here changed like the breath of a madman. The white storm spun everything into a circle, no before or after, no left or right, only the endless loop of snow. He closed his eyes, forcing his mind to still. "Just go straight," he whispered. "Whatever straight means, just go." The wind answered with laughter high, drawn out, circling him not from one direction, but from all. In that laughter, he thought he heard other sounds, metal clinking, a small bell, a sigh. Or maybe it was just his mind. When a man is alone too long, his thoughts begin to speak. He knew that, but he couldn't stop it. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw faces: the hunter who'd given him shelter, the girl at the northern post who smiled as she handed him the last parcel. But now they were all standing in the storm, their faces blurring, fading, dissolving. He opened his eyes. Everything was still white, white as unwritten paper, cold and empty. At some point, he could no longer tell what was ground and what was sky. Every step felt like falling into nothing. Sometimes it felt like he was going up, then down, then nowhere at all. The air around him thickened, dense enough to touch. It coiled around him, slipping into his collar, tightening around his back, like invisible hands testing his strength. Each breath was a battle. The cold pierced his lungs like 1,000 needles. His vision blurred. The snow kept falling. The wind kept howling. Time vanished. No past, no future. only the present, and the present was white, cold, endless. He bent down, tried to look behind him. No footprints. The wind had erased them all. He realized if he fell now, one more gust would wipe away every trace he'd ever existed. The thought made him grip the lantern tighter. The flame still burned, weak, but alive. "As long as there's fire, there's a way," he muttered, though his voice sounded strange, as if it came from someone else. He kept walking, step by step, swallowed by the storm. His heartbeat blended with the wind, soft, steady, defiant. A small creature in a white world, still proving it was alive. And somewhere deep within that storm, perhaps the wind was listening and smiling. The storm eased at midnight, but the wind never stopped screaming. He walked for hours before finding a clearing between the frozen trees, where old trunks, black and slick with frost, leaned like grave markers buried deep in snow. The air was heavy with the scent of burnt pine resin, the smell nomads believed marked where creatures hid. He stopped, knelt, and studied the snow. Under the flickering oil lamp swaying in the wind, he saw small tracks, shallow, dry, not reindeer, not snow hare. The claw marks were deep, with drags and scrapes. At first, he thought it was a lone animal, but when the light stretched farther, he saw dozens of them, overlapping, twisting into a circle, a ring. The air thickened, unnaturally still, so quiet he could hear the snow landing on his shoulders. He rose slowly, turning, lamp raised high, the tilted flame casting weak reflections across the slick tree trunks. Then he heard it, a low, dry growl, drawn out from behind. A second answered from the left, then a third, a fourth, until the whole forest seemed to breathe. He didn't need to look. He knew he was surrounded. Forest wolves. Not the small scavenging kind, but the great ones, born in endless winters, as big as ponies, fur thick and wet, jaws sharp enough to bite through steel. The locals said these beasts served the spirit of winter, appearing when the storms grew fat on wind, hunting for human warmth. He didn't believe that, but he knew this much: they were real and close. The moon had just climbed the far ridge, throwing pale strips of light through the forest. In that silver glow he saw them eyes, not one pair, but many, pale blue and burning like ghost flames. They moved slowly, circling, their steps silent except for the soft crush of snow. He stepped back once, the wind tugging at his cloak, tilting the lamp. He couldn't run. In a blizzard, running was suicide. They were faster, sharper, colder. The cold slowed men down, but for wolves, it woke them up. He bent, opened the pouch at his side, and pulled out a small flask of black oil, the kind nomads used to burn fire in a storm. Its smell was thick, sharp, clinging, but most of all, it burned, no matter how the wind screamed. He poured it in a ring around himself, thin but enough to buy a few breaths. When the last drop hit the snow, he struck his flint. A spark flashed, then died. He struck again. Nothing. The wind stole the heat. He took a deep breath, cupped his hand around the flame, struck a third time. This time, the spark caught. A thin, pale blue fire snaked outward, spreading fast like a living serpent, coiling around him. The blue light painted the trees, turning the whole forest into a burning dream. And in that light, he saw them clearly, at least 6, maybe more, fur-grey streaked with black, eyes glinting like glass. They stood a few meters away, heads low, shoulders trembling, not afraid of the fire, but unwilling to cross it. The reflection in their eyes was cold, lifeless, pure instinct. One growled, then the pack answered together. The sound rolled through the forest, shaking the snow beneath his boots. His chest tightened, but he didn't move. His hand gripped the ice blade knife, its steel catching the blue flame, shining with the same deadly chill as the land itself. They didn't attack, not yet. Forest wolves weren't stupid. They waited for the wind to die, for the fire to fade, for the man to fear. The wind shifted, growing stronger. The fire wavered, light flickering over his face. He heard footsteps, soft, shifting. A shadow darted on his right, so fast he only saw the snow explode. He spun, knife ready, but there was nothing, only cold. The wind laughed. Then another shadow lunged from behind. He struck by instinct, feeling the blade sink into something warm, then slide free to a furious growl. Blood splattered dark red, swallowed by the snow in seconds. The wounded wolf stumbled back, fur bristling, snarling. The others froze, watching. In that brief heartbeat, he heard his own pulse fast, steady, not panicked. He knew he only needed to survive a few more minutes until the wind rose again. The stronger the wind, the higher the flame. And as he'd hoped, the next gust swept through, fanning the blue ring into a roaring blaze, lighting the sky for an instant. The wolves jumped back, howled, then melted into the dark. Their footsteps faded, leaving him alone inside the shrinking circle of fire. He exhaled, breath turning to mist. Sweat rolled down his neck, freezing into a thin layer of ice. He looked around, no one left, only streaks of dark blood mixing with white snow, and paw prints already vanishing in the wind. He knelt, took a handful of dry ash from his pouch, and scattered it around the dying fire, a northern ritual to ward off beast spirits. "I passed today," he murmured, his voice carried away by the wind, "but not forever." The blue fire dimmed, leaving only red embers, like eyes closing. He stood, packed his gear, and walked on, leaving behind the scent of burnt oil tangled in the wind. Somewhere deep in the woods, a howl rose again, long and cold, like a warning. He didn't look back. He knew he was no longer walking alone. Night falls fast in the polar lands, so fast that while he's still looking for a place to set up camp, the sky has already sunk into a thick, blue-grey haze. The moon hides somewhere behind the streaks of white clouds, casting a pale, ghostly light that makes everything look unreal. After the battle with the wolves, he walks for hours before finding a hollow between two ice ridges, a place sheltered from the wind. There, the air is calmer, the wind only whispering as it passes. He stops, drops his pack, his hands trembling from the cold. Every movement feels like his joints are cracking, but still, he works carefully, drawing his knife, cutting blocks of snow, stacking them one by one into a circle. Building a snow shelter is a ritual of survival. There's no room for mistakes. If the walls are too thin, the wind will pierce through. If they're not sealed, the heat will escape, and death will crawl in to take its place. He works in silence. The only sounds are the knife hitting the snow and his steady breath. After a while, a small dome takes shape, low, thick, and solid. He crawls inside, dragging his pack and lamp with him, sealing the entrance with a slab of packed snow. Inside, it's pitch black but calm, so quiet he can hear his own heartbeat, the soft fall of snow from the roof, and the distant roar of the wind outside. The space is tight, but his breath slowly warms the air, coating the inner walls with a thin layer of frost. He lights the oil lamp. The dim glow spreads, turning the air into a muted amber hue. The smell of burning oil and animal hide mixes sharp, bitter, but warm. He opens his pack, pulls out a piece of hard bread so dry it clicks like metal when tapped. He smiles faintly, then breaks it apart with his knife. Eating in the polar cold isn't about being full, it's to remind the body it still exists. Each bite he chews for a long time, letting it soften in his breath. It tastes like cold sand, but there's a faint sweetness at the end like memory. Sweet only because it's gone. He leans back against his pack, closes his eyes, and lets the lamp's warmth touch his face. The cold still creeps around him, slow and patient, like a small beast looking for a place to sleep. He pulls a pelt over his shoulders, up to his neck, and exhales. In the golden light, his face looks hollow, his chin dusted with frost, eyes sunken deep. Under the lamp's glow, he could be mistaken for the dead, if not for the faint fog leaving his lips. From his chest, he takes out something wrapped in cloth, a small round piece of metal, engraved with a swirling pattern, worn smooth by time. He opens it. Inside is a faded photograph, only a blurred outline of a woman's face remaining. He looks at it for a long time, then touches it gently, his calloused fingers trembling. "If I make it through this winter," he whispers, "I'll bring the news home." No one answers, only the lamp flickers in reply. He tucks the picture away, pulls his coat up. Outside, the wind shifts, howling through the cracks like a cry. The sound reminds him of other nights, other shelters at the northern station, where the tents were bigger, where there were people, laughter, and stories told by hunters around the fire. They spoke of ghosts in the ice, spirits lost in the storm, wolves that could speak in human tongues. Back then, he would sit quietly, listen, and smile when someone got scared. Now, only he and the wind remain. The wind sounds like voices out there, but he knows the ice loves to mimic the living. To fight that silence, he starts to speak softly, not to anyone, but to himself. "Tomorrow will be lighter, if the storm passes," he murmurs. "Maybe I'll reach the northern station before the fuel runs out." Each word he says turns to mist, drifts up the wall, and freezes into tiny beads of ice. They sparkle like stars. He looks up at them and smiles. In a land where sky and ground are one, people learn to find the heavens even inside their smallest shelters. Then a noise. He freezes. The wind? No. Something heavy slides past the tent, snow collapsing softly from the roof. He snuffs the lamp. Darkness swallows everything. The shelter becomes what it truly is, a temporary grave in the frozen woods. He holds his breath, listening. Footsteps, heavy, slow, stopping right outside. His hand grips the knife, every muscle tensed. The steps move again, fading, swallowed by the storm. An animal? Or something else? He doesn't know, and he doesn't want to. In this land, some things are better unnamed, because once you name them, they'll come. After a while, he lights the lamp again. The glow returns small, fragile, but strangely comforting. He takes out a small metal tube, opens it, and pulls out a few flints and a strip of resin-soaked cloth. He lights it, sets it in the middle of the shelter. The flame flickers, its light dancing across his face. He stretches his hands toward it, fingers turning red, feeling the blood come alive again. Then he bows his head, closes his eyes, and lets himself sink into that fragile warmth. In his half-sleep, he dreams of a road endless, glowing blue beneath the northern lights. Someone stands at the far end, back turned, hair flowing in the wind. He calls out, but they don't turn around. When he steps closer, the wind rises, and they dissolve into snow. He wakes suddenly. The lamp is dying. His breath comes heavy, unsure if from cold or from the dream. He lies still, listening. The wind outside has softened, steady, distant. The storm is gone. He exhales, the white mist drifting up, fading. He closes his eyes again, and this time, he doesn't dream. There's only silence. And in that silence, snow falls again softly, like a vast blanket covering the small shelter, where one man sleeps through a winter without borders between night and day. In the fragile warmth of the snow shelter, as the oil lamp breathed in weak pulses, and the wind outside whispered like someone gently stroking the tent with an icy hand, memory pulled him back toward the south where the road began, and where a promise was spoken in a voice trembling not from cold, but from happiness. The southern station then was not white, it was the brown of wood, the red of scarves hung out to dry, the gold of fire dancing in the stove's mouth, and the honey colour resting in the eyes of the woman smiling his wife. Back then, snow had not yet fallen, only thin mist and the scent of fresh pine sap. The market at the edge of the station, alive with hammer strikes against anvils, sparks flying like summer fireflies, voices bartering salt for fur, children laughing as they chased each other around empty barrels. He remembered standing in the doorway, hands dusty from the road, soft leather shoes damp with sweat, and she came to him, placed in his hand a scarf woven from coarse flax, red as a late plum, saying, "When the wind grows strong, wrap this around your neck, it smells like home." He had smiled, the kind of smile that made her cheeks flush, and in that instant, the world had no storms, only warmth. They had eaten barley cakes fried on iron, drizzled with reindeer fat, sprinkled with crisp rock salt, and drank the bittersweet liquor that burned in the throat. While outside, the bone chime clinked in clumsy rhythm like a lullaby for peace. He remembered her talking about the new pile of firewood, the grey cat that liked to sleep on the chest lid, the batch of beeswax candles still fragrant with old sunlight, and he told her of the northern roads ahead. The ice forest with trunks white as porcelain, the frozen river cracking like glass, the hills where wind sang all night like someone playing a flute. She listened, eyes deep and bright, then laid her small hand on his chest, right over the steady beat, and whispered, afraid to wake something inside him. You'll be back before the second storm, won't you? He hadn't hesitated, only nodded, because back then storms were fairy tales and promises were safe little fires. Before the second storm? He repeated, like hammering a warm nail into time. The next morning, as he shouldered his pack, checked his knife, lit his lamp, she tied the red scarf around his neck, just tight enough to trap the warmth, then rose on her toes and kissed the corner of his mouth, where the liquor still smelled of honey. The whole station came to see him off. The blacksmith handed him a sharp piece of steel. The salt cellar pressed a pouch of mint-scented herbs into his palm. The child waved purple fingers in a silent go. Go. He left, turned back twice. Once to see her smiling face through wet eyes. Once to watch the wooden door close slowly, like a gentle eye going to sleep. The wind chime followed him a long way. In the snow shelter now, he could hear it again, thin, clear, just above his head. In the early days of the journey, the promise was light as the scarf itself. He wrapped it because he liked the smell of home. Later, when the wind cracked his lips and the snow snapped like bones, the promise grew heavy as a stone in his inner pocket. Every time he touched it, he felt a flicker of warmth. On some nights at the halfway station, he'd unfold the scarf, lay it under his head, and sleep as if resting on her lap, dreaming of her walking across the porch, broom in hand, humming wordless tunes. On harsh mornings, when the wind screamed, the damp wool smell brought him back from panic like a hand pulling a sleepwalker from the cliff's edge. Before the first storm season, he'd calmly mark days by notches on his knife handle. Each mark a night spent with hunters, a story traded for half a loaf of bread. By midwinter, the promise stretched longer, because the road did, because wolves turned their howls into tight strings, because the white storms swallowed every landmark, because the letters he carried for others grew thicker, layered like ice over rivers. But he still counted, still carved, still whispered, before the second storm. And now, in this low dome of snow, with the lamp flame no bigger than a fingernail but enough to make his shadow tremble on the wall, that memory returned not to haunt, but to warm. He drew out the red scarf darkened by frost, frayed at the corners, but still smelling faintly of pine and hearth smoke, wrapped it tighter around his neck, pulled the edge to his chin, and closed his eyes, imagining her breath on that very fabric. He heard the stove crackling at the southern station, heard her pour boiling water into the clay pot, heard the cat jump from the chest and stretch lazily. Memory, in the moment when the wind tried to pull him from himself, had sewn him back together with a thread of red peace. He understood why northerners always hid a token of home in their coats. A button, a broken comb, a scrap of cloth, because they weren't just objects, they were markers on the invisible map, leading the lost back toward life. He opened his mail pouch, took out a letter wrapped in deerskin, placed it near the lamp, so the wax softened not to pry, but to feel the letters still rising under his fingertips, proof that the world of words still breathed. "I'll return," he whispered, not just to her, but to the fire, the scarf, the wind, before the second storm. The promise left his mouth, warmth rising as if someone had just added wood to the hearth. The wind outside heard, changed tone, stopped screaming, and hummed low as if in agreement. He pulled the hood down to his eyes, rested his head on the pack, hand over his knife as always, and before closing his eyes, he touched the scarf's edge, like touching the door of home. "Tomorrow, I keep going," he said to the dark, as if to her smile. "The road is long, but I'm on my way back." Outside, snow fell thicker, blanketing the roof in silence, soft and warm as a quilt, while inside, memory lay down beside him, gentle as a grey cat, curled up, breathing softly, keeping the night from breaking. That afternoon, when the sun was nothing more than a thin streak of light scratching across the grey edge of the sky, he saw something strange on the slope of the ice. A distorted black shape jutting up through the whiteness, like a beast long dead still trying to hold its stance. He slowed his steps, heels biting into the brittle crust, the oil lamp on his shoulder swinging small trembling circles of light, until he stopped before a low wooden shack, its roof half collapsed, its walls patched with sheets of hide frozen stiff as stone. The hut sat hidden behind a ring of ice trees, shielded by the wind from the main path. If the slanted sunlight hadn't hit that charred edge of timber just right, He might have passed it by, never knowing. He circled, listening. The wind coiled through the cracks of broken wood, whistling like a young soldier awaiting the change of guard, then died away. No scent of new smoke, only the rot of wood and the rancid tang of old animal fat, the sour sting of long months without a soul. He gripped his knife, gently pried at the door rimmed with ice. The frost cracked into shards clear as glass, tinkling as they fell into the snow. The door opened heavily, as though an entire old winter pressed against it from behind. Inside was dark, but not entirely. Moonlight spilled through a gap in the roof, falling in a stripe across the floorboards dusted with a fine layer of snow, no thicker than the skin of an old letter. He raised his lamp, the yellow light sweeping over each object, a tilted table propped by a stone. 2 empty wooden barrels scored by the dull cuts of knives once used to carve meat. An iron stake near the wall, still tied with a strip of leather hardened stiff. And in the corner, a crude plank bed covered by cracked animal hide, with a few white hairs scattered like frozen threads. On the table lay a wrapped bundle of hide. He brushed off the snow, slid his knife tip under the flap. Inside was paper, a rarity in the Icelands, thick, coarse, its edges torn and stained with patches of damp and dryness. He unfolded it, slow enough to hear the fibers rasp. A hand-drawn map emerged, ink faded dark, lines trembling but steady, mountains sketched as leaning triangles, rivers, thin curves, ice forests dotted like swarms of insects. And in the centre the path, not one, but many, winding through ravines and frozen lakes, some sections crossed out in red ink, beside notes written in southern letters, cracked, no passage, wolf night. In one place, 3 dots and a looping arrow, like a sigh turned into a mark. He leaned closer, feeling as if a voice from months ago whispered through it, someone who had gone, tried, failed, turned back and left the way for whoever came after. In the map's corner was a small drawn crest, a shield quartered into 4, flame, sword, snowflake, and pine branch. He recognized it instantly. Southern Army. Even with the ink blurred, their precision was unmistakable, detailed notes, elevation marks, even step counts between stone markers. Along the edge, a short, slanted line of writing. First month of the first storm, will return to East Station. If you read this, do not cross Broken Bay. The script faltered at the word broken, as though the writer's hand had trembled from wind or fear. He looked up. The shack made a sound, but when he held his breath, only the wind remained. He rolled the map, tucked it into his inner coat, and continued to search. Under the plank bed was a low chest. The lock was rusted but unlatched. He opened it with his knife, gently, so the metal wouldn't ring into the forest. Inside, only scraps of cloth, a few black candle stubs burnt to the wick, and a torn piece of clothing. He lifted it. Frost glued the fibers, making it stiff as bark. When the lamp's heat melted the ice, colour emerged. Deep blue faded, streaked with soot grey. On the left chest, a patch embroidered with the same shield as the map, but real silver thread rising, red border tight and even. The stitches strong as an oath, the Southern Army insignia. He held the cloth between his palms, close to the lamp. The border frayed, a few threads loose like grey hair, some scorched. A stale burnt smell rose, mingling with fat and damp leather, drying his throat. His fingers brushed a hard crust, like crystallized salt blood dried from the last season, now turned to silent crystal. He laid the cloth flat on the table, smoothing it, and in that moment the room felt full of people. A small unit huddled around a lamp, the youngest holding up this very badge, laughing. The oldest drawing lines on the map with a wooden compass, another sharpening arrows, another listening to wolves howling far away. Then the storm came faster, thicker than the rest. They left in haste, taking what they could, abandoning what they had to, and among those things, a spare map, a torn shirt stripped to bandage a wound, never retrieved. He crossed to the opposite wall, where a strip of planking was nailed. On it, a tangle of short carved lines someone had marked days here, quietly, patiently, stopping at 32. Beside them, cut by knife, 2 words. Wait, wind, calm. The word calm carved deeper than the rest, like a plea. He brushed it with his fingertips. The cold burned. In the corner, something glinted, a small brass button, no bigger than a bean, engraved with the letter M in the southern script, issued upon enlistment. He pocketed it with the map and the cloth, not as theft, but as rescue. In this land, carrying another's trace is sometimes the only way to keep them from vanishing. He turned to the doorway, looked out. The sky had dropped another shade of grey. Snow began to fall lazily, flakes broad and soft as ash. He hesitated. Stay for the night, or head toward the valley's edge? The hut offered shelter but also memories, and in storms, memories could turn deadly. He chose not to sleep here. Before leaving, he put things in order. Pulled a chunk of charcoal from the old stove, drew a small arrow on the table pointing south-southeast, and wrote 2 words beside it, Still Road. A warmth left for whoever might follow. Closed the chest, covered it with hide so the wind wouldn't lift it, pulled the door shut, wedged it with a splinter of wood. He stood still for a breath, listening to the shack exhale. If any spirits lingered, they deserved to hear the door close gently, like a farewell. Then he turned, quietly descending the slope. The wind caught him like a creature glad to see him, but this time it carried direction. In his coat pocket, the old map trembled faintly with each step, like a small heart beating between his own. The torn cloth brushed his chest through the layers, cold, reminding him that those who bore that crest once stood here, looked up at this same grey sky, and chose that same path. He tightened his grip on the lamp handle. The thin flame spread a tender gold over the snow, redrawing the path before his boots. Behind him, the shack sank into whiteness, becoming just another wrinkle on the land's skin. But in his pocket were the map, the insignia, the button, tiny things, yet heavy enough to pull human memory back together. And as the wind roared through the frozen woods, it seemed to read aloud each note from the map, softly and clearly. Wolf Night. Cracked ground. Broken bay don't. The wind doesn't lie. It only reminds. Whether to go on, that belongs to those who still know how to keep fire in their hands. That road didn't appear on any map except the one he'd just found. A thin line, crossed through with black ink, beside it a slanted note in small letters. Permanently frozen. No further annotations, no elevations, no weather notes. No destination, just a straight path cutting across the northern rim of the nameless hills. He stared at it for a long time, tracing it with his finger as if touching a scar that had already healed. The way the line ended so abruptly unsettled him. It didn't loop back, didn't fade, just stopped in a blank space, as though the hand that drew it had been forced to stop mid-stroke. Outside, the light dimmed, the last glimmers of sunset dissolving into mist. He stood among the ice trees, map in hand, hearing the wind shift its rhythm. At that moment, he felt something or someone watching him from below. Not from the forest, but from beneath his feet, from within the ice. The northern people had an old story about the permanently frozen road. They said that there, the ice never melts, no matter the season, no matter how the wind turns. That beneath it isn't earth but emptiness, where something sleeps, a creature, or a relic of an older world. Those who crossed it never returned, or came back silent, eyes dim, skin pale as ash. He had once dismissed it as a tale to frighten children, but now, with the traces of the southern soldiers leading that way, it was no longer a story. He spread the map again, aligning it with the land. The road began east of the broken valley, cutting through the forest of ice thorns, then curved into the dead plateau where the sun never rose above the peaks. It was the direction he was heading. A chill crawled up his spine, though the wind stayed the same. He folded the map carefully and tucked it into his inner pocket, but in his mind, that thin black line still glowed like a thread across the snow. He walked on. The wind pushed at his back, whether urging or warning he couldn't tell. Snow thickened, veiling his tracks, turning everything into a boundless plain. When night fell, he stopped by a shallow ravine, where ice plates rose in overlapping layers like fish scales. There he planted his lamp and took out his compass. The needle pointed north but trembled, swayed a few degrees, then steadied again. He turned, tested it twice, same result. Something beneath the ground was wrong. He sat, pulled a steel rod from his pack, and stabbed it into the ice. The blade sank deeper than usual, not hitting rock but slipping into something softer, denser, like frozen mud. When he drew it back, a thin strand clung to the tip, black, thick, and tough. He tugged. It recoiled, then snapped. He looked around. Only white snow. The wind was silent, unnaturally so. In the polar lands, when the wind stops, it means the ice is listening. He buried the black strand in snow, covered it, then cleared a space to light a fire. But fire resisted this place. He poured tar oil, struck the flint, the spark flashed, then died, as if something had swallowed it. The second time, he bent lower, shielding the flame, and finally, a weak blue fire caught, flickering. Its light reflected on the ice, casting ripples that moved like waves, making the ground seem to breathe. He didn't stare too long, just pulled his coat tight, placed his knife close, and sat, waiting. In that trembling light, he unfolded the map again, studying the part marked permanently frozen. There was a tiny symbol just before the line ended, not letters, but a single spiral, like the mark of a reversed current. That symbol didn't exist in any military chart. It was an ancient sign, carved into stones the nomads avoided, believing it marked places not meant for breath. He drew in a slow breath, murmured, "So you went there too." His words drifted, then vanished. After a while, he heard something faint, not the wind, but a sound rising from below, low and steady, like the breathing of someone asleep under the ice. Each breath made the ground tremble, tilting the flame. He froze, listening. The sound lasted a few seconds, then stopped. He waited longer. Nothing. Maybe it was shifting ice. Maybe not. He looked outside. Tonight, the aurora was faint. A pale blue ribbon stretched across the horizon, lighting the snow in an eerie glow. The reflection on the ice turned distant ground into a mirror, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw a figure walking. One person, upright, slow, carrying a light. He blinked, gone. He didn't go out to check. In this land, what the ice reflected no longer belonged to the living. He covered the flame, dimming it, and leaned back against his pack. In his coat, the map pulsed faintly, as if it had its own heartbeat. He knew that by morning, he'd have to choose. Take the long way around the plateau safe, but 7 days lost, or go straight across the path, crossed out in black, permanently frozen. He closed his eyes, but the image of the road stayed, straight, endless. In half-sleep, he dreamed he was walking it. Beneath his boots, the ice was clear enough to see things stirring below. Above him, the green aurora coiled like a vast serpent, and far ahead, where the road ended, stood a gate of ice, carved with that same spiral, half open, half shut. When he touched it, the ice quivered, then parted, revealing a blinding white light. He woke with a start. The fire had died, only a thin smoke rising. Outside, the wind had returned, blowing north, the same direction as the black road on the map. He clenched his hand and knew, whether he wanted it or not, he'd been chosen. That road was calling. That morning, snow fell like ashlight but thick, covering every trace of the night before. He left his shelter when the first light touched the ice, the map tucked in his coat, his heartbeat slow and steady like a clock ticking in endless silence. The road north opened before him like a wound cut across the white earth. No markers, no trees, only the wind to guide the way. He had gone a few miles when he heard something different within the wind, a sound that didn't belong, broken, hoarse, heavy. He stopped, tilting his head to listen. Amid the whisper of cold air and the crunch of snow beneath his boots, it came again, a groan. He moved slowly, hand on the hilt of his ice blade, following the sound. Up ahead, between two slabs of ice, lay a figure curled upon itself, half buried in snow. The man's armor was crusted with frost, but still glimmered faintly silver. Blackened blood had frozen around his shoulder, a deep wound cutting through the plates, edges crusted with shattered steel. The traveller knelt, brushing the ice from the man's face. A sunburnt face, bearded, eyes half closed but breath still faintly there. On his chest, a sigil of braided copper, a hawk with wings spread. It was the mark of the far northern tribes, the ones southern men spoke of with a mix of respect and fear. The Sky Keepers. He had heard of them in the outposts, people who lived high upon the frozen plains, where the cold was sharpest and solitude deepest. They appeared only when great storms rolled down, wielding the craft of ice and battle against the wolves. It was said they believed not in gods, only in the wind. Now, one of them lay dying before him. He looked around, then drew a small knife, slicing the armor open at the wound, pouring in liquor and powdered herbs. The man convulsed, eyes snapping open grey, like ash filled with caution before realizing the stranger meant no harm. "Not wolves?" the man rasped, voice scraping like stone. "No," he said quietly. "Just a man." The warrior gave a faint smile, blood cracking on his lips, and nodded. He built a snow shelter nearby, kindled a fire with the last resin he had left. When the flame caught, blue smoke coiled upward, painting their faces, the southern wanderer and the northern fighter facing each other amid the white. Hours passed before the warrior woke fully. The traveller handed him water and a piece of hard bread. He accepted, chewing slowly, eyes still searching the horizon. "Where are you headed this season?" he asked, voice rough but steadier. "North," the traveller said. "Across the broken ridge." "No one crosses there," the warrior murmured. "There's a road sealed in ice." "I know," he said. "I carry the map of those who tried." Silence stretched. After a while the warrior spoke again. "South?" "Yes." The man nodded. "I thought your kind were all dead." "Maybe we are," he said, eyes fixed on the fire. "I just haven't taken my turn yet." They sat listening to the wind howl outside. In the warrior's eyes he saw not fear, but loss, the kind all survivors wear. "We fought something beneath the ice," the warrior said quietly, voice thin as breath. It had no shape, only sound. It twisted the wind, made men forget their path. The ice opened, then closed. My brothers vanished under it. The traveller said nothing. In these lands, some truths were too heavy to hold. "I wasn't meant to go that way," the warrior continued, "but if the wind drives you there, I'll go with you. One lamp isn't enough for that place." The traveller meant to refuse, but when he met the man's eyes, cold, clear, like stone under a frozen stream, he knew he couldn't. Two men, two worlds, crossing in the ice, no reason needed, only the knowledge that solitude meant death. They sat through the night without words, letting the wind tell what words could not. By dawn, the storm had eased. The sky was milky white, the ground so bright it burned the eyes. They packed their gear. The warrior bound his armor with leather cords, wrapping the wound in cloth. The traveller gave him tar oil and a spark stone. In return, he received a bone knife carved with the tribe's emblem, a pact unspoken. Then they walked, side by side, across thick ice split by long cracks like sleeping serpents. Every step snapped faintly, echoing like dry bones. The wind crossed them sideways, whipping their cloaks in the same direction. They spoke no more, but from that moment on, the wind carried more than one heartbeat. Sometimes, resting between walls of frozen stone, the warrior muttered in a strange tongue, low, steady, like a song. The traveller didn't understand, but guessed it was how they spoke to the wind. Once, he asked, "Who do you sing for?" The man replied, "For those who've gone ahead so they know I'm not yet coming." They kept walking through lands where even light was cold. One night, sheltering beneath a ledge, the traveller unrolled the map to show him. The warrior studied it, his finger tracing the words permanently frozen. "You know," he said, voice deep, "my people call this the place where ice sleeps. When the wind shifts from east to west, you can hear singing beneath the ground. If you listen too long, you forget your own name." "Have you heard it?" the traveller asked. The warrior gave a thin smile, touching the scar along his neck. "Once. Since then, I've never found my way home." They looked at each other over the dwindling flame. In that moment, he understood they weren't just walking toward danger, but crossing a boundary between man and something else. For the first time, he didn't feel alone in the snow. But he also knew, when there are two fires, the shadow behind them grows larger. The storm returned on the third day, fiercer than before, as if the land itself refused to let two strangers walk deeper into its heart. The wind rose from the opposite direction, dragging long lashes of snow that whipped across their faces and necks, forcing them to hunch low just to move forward. By now, the road was nothing but a white mirage in the void. No one could tell if they were moving ahead or circling a dead point. They stopped when the wind grew so strong it pushed their breath back into their throats. The northern warrior scanned the horizon, eyes sharp as a blade, then pointed toward a crack in the rocks. He followed the gesture, a narrow dark slit, like the mouth of the ice itself. "In there," the warrior said curtly. He hesitated. "Not sure that's shelter." "Standing out here is a grave," the warrior replied. There was no arguing with that. They went in. The crevice was narrow, just wide enough for one man to stoop through, then widened into a small hollow cold, damp, filled with the breath of frozen mist. He set down the oil lamp. Its glow rose onto their faces. 2 men, 2 worlds, now sharing a single breath. The wind was shut out, but silence came instead heavier than the storm. He opened his pack, poured the last of the liquor into the lid, and held it out. The other didn't take it. His eyes, no longer weary but guarded, fixed on him. "You carry the map," he said, voice low and even. "I've seen you look at it every night." "Because I need it to live," he answered. "Or to find something. Is there a difference?" he asked in return. The warrior was silent, then smirked faintly. "Southerners never travel just to live. You're always searching." He said nothing. In the roar outside, that sentence slid through the air like a thin blade too shallow to kill, deep enough to sting. He studied the man. Broad frame, strong, but the wound at his shoulder still seeped red through the bandage. He sat upright, one hand gripping the axe handle, the other resting near the fire, not for warmth, but to block the light from his eyes. He knew that look. Not fear, but the wariness of someone once betrayed. Slowly he said, "If I meant you harm, I would have left you to die in the snow." The man chuckled, hoarse. "Or you want me alive long enough to lead the way?" The fire crackled softly, the light flickering across their faces, making them look like 2 reflections of the same shadow, a wanderer of wind and a son of ice. For a moment, he felt a thin, invisible line between them, fragile but hard as the frozen surface of a lake. He knew one wrong move would shatter it. He placed his hand on the knife at his belt, not to draw, just to show. "If you mean to kill me, wait until the storm passes," he said quietly. "Then the wind will carry the sound of blood faster." The warrior said nothing, then loosened his grip. "You're right," he breathed out, white mist curling in the air. "I'm not ready to die tonight." They spoke no more. Both sat still, listening to the wind batter the rock like a beast snarling outside, searching for a way in. After a while, the fire waned. He reached into his pouch, threw in a piece of dry resin, the flame flared blue. The warrior nodded. "You know how to use fire," he said. "You know how to hold an axe," he replied. The man gave a short, dry laugh, this time without mockery. "Then we're even." After a moment, he took something from his coat, a small black stone, smooth, carved with a circular mark, and set it between them. "Tribe's token," he said. "I'll leave it here. If I die, you take it north. If you die, I'll bury it with you. Is that enough trust?" He looked at the stone, the light reflected off it like an open eye. "You believe in promises?" he asked. "No," the man replied. "But I believe in the wind. If it led me to you, I should try." He reached out, touched the stone lightly. "All right," he said. "I promise." They looked at each other across the dying flame. The mistrust was still there, but dulled, turned into a tight thread stretched between them, held together by the faint warmth of shared breath. That night, the storm hammered the rock until the ground shook. Snow blew through the cracks, coating their boots and sleeves. They took turns watching. One rested, the other stayed awake. When the warrior finally drifted into sleep, he muttered words between quick breaths. The traveller caught only 2. White road. Maybe a place, maybe a curse. He watched the wound on the man's shoulder, knowing without him he could travel faster, but also knowing faster didn't mean longer. When it was his turn to sleep, the warrior was already awake, feeding the fire. The flames rose, painting the cave walls in long, wind-like streaks. In that brief warmth, they were no longer strangers, just 2 small creatures pressed together beneath winter's wrath. By morning, the storm had eased. Snow blocked half the entrance. They had to carve their way out with knives. When the wind returned, it bit the skin open. but the light had come back. They stood outside, staring at a world pure white and still, as if no storm had ever been. The warrior tightened his cloak and said softly, "From now on, if I doubt you, I'll ask. If you doubt me, speak. Don't stay silent. Silence is how the ice kills fastest." He nodded. The man turned and walked ahead, leaving deep, straight prints in the snow. The traveller followed, eyes fixed on those steps, and for the first time in the endless white, he had a path to walk, even if only for a while. They found it on the fourth sunset, when the wind fell silent in an unnatural way, and the air grew so heavy it felt like even the snow was holding its breath. All day long the ground ahead had shimmered faintly under the grey light, as if the ice itself were moving underneath. The northern warrior, walking ahead, suddenly stopped and raised his hand for silence. He stepped forward and followed the man's gaze. Before them stretched a flat field of ice, vast and endless, but at its centre ran a thin crack like a cut on human skin. That crack was opening slowly but unmistakably. From deep below, a white vapour rose, thick and heavy, not smoke, but breath. He held his breath. The ground trembled beneath them, softly at first, then stronger, in rhythm like the heartbeat of a giant creature waking. The sky dimmed, snow began to swirl, and a deep thunder-like roar burst from the earth. The warrior drew his axe, voice hoarse. "Run!" But before they could turn, the ice ahead exploded. A tower of snow shot up higher than the trees, bursting like a pillar of smoke. Through the haze, a shape rose slow, immense, alive with power. A colossal beast, fur white with a sheen of silver, so large that each step split the ground into trenches. Its horns twisted like carved stone pillars, glinting with a metallic light. Its eyes glowed icy blue, reflecting across the snow in eerie streaks. When it roared, it wasn't the cry of an animal. It was the sound of earth, wind, and shattering ice woven into one endless bellow that shook their chests. "Snowkeeper," the warrior whispered, face pale. "Impossible. They died with the first age of frost." He didn't have time to ask. The creature lowered its head, its breath spilling into the air in thick mist that froze even the wind. Just breathing it burned the throat like swallowing stone. They stepped back, but every movement made the ice quake. "Don't run," he whispered. "It can hear sound." The warrior nodded, eyes locked on the beast. It turned its head slowly, as if sniffing their presence. They pressed themselves flat against the snow, trying to blend their breath with the white. But hearts they couldn't hide the sound of hearts. He heard his pulse, and the others fast, uneven, frantic. The creature paused. A shorter roar came, like an answer. Then it lifted its head, horns brushing the fog above, sparking streaks of blue lightning through the air. Cracks spread across the ice like veins in glass. "It's going to break through," the warrior murmured, trembling. "If the ice collapses, this whole valley falls." He grabbed the man's arm, pulling him toward a ridge of stone. They ran, every step sinking deep, the wind slamming against them as if the earth itself tried to hold them back. Behind them, the ice cracked like cannon fire. The beast reared, its body towering above the clouds, snow crashing down like waterfalls. A gale hit them hard, throwing them to the ground. He tumbled down the slope, the oil lamp flying from his hand, the flame snuffed out. The world plunged into white, cold silence. He pushed up, saw the warrior standing firm, axe shaking in his grip as the earth quaked beneath. "We can't outrun it," the warrior shouted through the storm. "We make it fear." He thought he'd misheard, but the man's eyes weren't desperate. They were resolved, like someone who'd seen death and chosen to face it. "How?" he shouted back. But the warrior was already reaching into his coat, pulling out the black stone he'd once placed between them during that night of distrust. He raised it high and shouted in the old tongue deep, thunderous words that ripped through the air. The ground answered with a low rumble, and suddenly the cold wind shifted. The beast froze, its eyes blazing brighter, turning toward them. The blue glow from its gaze hit the black stone, and it began to burn, steaming in his hand. "Back!" the warrior yelled. He stepped away, hand on his blade. A bolt of blue light shot past, striking a rock behind them, blasting it apart and sending snow high into the air. The creature roared again, a sound that tore through the world, and charged. The ground convulsed. He nearly fell, but the warrior hurled the stone down and shouted, "Seal it!" In an instant, the ice beneath the beast glowed, hundreds of cracks flaring like a spider's web, and then closed, thicker, harder. The creature stomped, struggling, but its legs were trapped, locked in frozen chains. It howled, thrashing wildly. He drew his knife, slashed open the oil flask, and threw it at its feet. The warrior understood, struck the flint. A column of blue fire erupted, spreading fast across the ice, feeding on the oil burning in jagged veins. The creature screamed one final time, a cry that tore the sky apart. The aurora above shattered into trembling ribbons of light. Then it went still. Only the smell of burned oil and melting snow remained. The ice cooled. The world fell quiet. They stood there, watching the fading blue glow. The warrior knelt, scooped a handful of icy ash, and said in a voice like a prayer, "The snow keeper won't sleep again. But what lies beneath isn't dead." He looked at him, firelight flickering in their eyes, one who believed in wind, one who believed in the path. Both understood. The beast wasn't the worst thing buried in the ice. It was only the guardian of what still waits below. And once again, the wind began to change direction. The storm fell the moment the beast rose again, so fierce that the sky no longer knew where cloud ended and earth began. Wind cracked like whips. Snow rolled into white waves that devoured the hill where they stood. The roar came again, long, strangled, like 1,000 glaciers breaking at once. He could no longer see its full shape, only the two blue eyes swimming inside the storm. The warrior shouted something through the wind, his voice torn away, but he understood, split, confuse its path. They ran in opposite directions, boots scraping across slick ice, slipping, regaining balance, as if running over glass. Each step, his heartbeat pounded in his ears, the wind screaming, the roar closing behind. The warrior hurled his axe, striking the ice to the right, carving a long fracture. He understood immediately the ice was weak there. If they could lure it close, they might have a chance. He pulled out the last pouch of pitch oil, poured it along the crack, then struck his flint. Sparks caught, blue fire flaring, smoke rising like a ghostly pillar. The beast charged, its horns sweeping wide, the blast of air from the swing throwing him off his feet, rolling him over the ice. The ground quaked, the fire snuffed out, but the ice beneath the creature began to give. It roared, staggering, clawing, trying to hold on. He pushed himself up, blood in his mouth, and hurled his knife at its trapped leg. The blade bounced off its skin, was harder than steel. The warrior lunged, grabbing the chain slung across the beast's shoulder, driving his axe into its neck. Steel hit something denser than stone, but then came a crack, and white vapor burst out. The creature swung its head, horns catching him, flinging him aside. He screamed, ran to pull him up, but by then the storm had turned into a white cyclone, erasing everything. Only the blue eyes burned through the snow, every step it took collapsing more ground. "Fire!" he shouted, not sure if the warrior could hear, and tore a strip of oil-soaked cloth, wrapping it around his spearhead, lighting it with the last drop of oil in his lamp. The wind almost killed the flame, but he shielded it, forcing it alive. Then he hurled the burning spear. The fire sailed through the gale, struck the beast's flank, and caught on the silver fur. At first, only a spark, but then its whole body ignited, burning blue like ghost fire. The snow didn't melt, it burned. Each flake shattered like glass, glowing as it fell, turning the blizzard into a rain of cold fire. The warrior pushed himself up, eyes wide, his face lit in blue. "You did it," he said, but there was no joy in his voice, only dread. The beast roared, half its body aflame, but it didn't die. It rolled, swung its tail, flinging a mountain of snow toward them. They dove into a crevice, fire brushing above their heads, hair singed. Heat and frost merged. The paradox stung their skin raw, as if both burned at once. He pulled out the last explosive pouch meant for breaking ice, and looked at the warrior. The man nodded, silent. They climbed onto a tall rock, the wind so fierce one slip would mean death. The beast still howled, half burning, the ice beneath it splitting wide, revealing a black pit beneath. The warrior struck the flint, he lit the fuse, and together they threw it down. The explosion was deep, not thunder, but the sound of earth breaking. The ice collapsed. The beast roared one last time before its massive body sank into the pit. The blue light from its eyes stretched through the air, then vanished. The storm ended as suddenly as it came. Above them, the aurora returned red and orange this time, like a wound torn open between sky and land. They sat there, gasping. Sweat froze on their faces, breath turning to mist. The wind calmed, but the scent of ash lingered. Burning snow, something no one believed could exist now, covered the ground like celestial ash, soft and cold, each flake leaving a white burn where it touched. The warrior looked up, voice rough. "You saw it. Ice can burn. But when snow learns fear, the world won't stay whole." He said nothing. The man was right. They had driven the beast away, but the price was a land changed forever. In the distance, cracks ran through the glaciers, cold smoke rising like the ghosts of winter awakened. He looked at his trembling hands. The wind had shifted not north anymore, but south. He knew this wasn't victory. It was the beginning of something larger, deeper, as if when fire meets snow, both lose what they are. The warrior met his eyes, half a smile, half sorrow. "We survived," he said, "but I'm not sure we're still human." Then he reached out, gripped his shoulder. In the field of white ash they sat in silence, surrounded by fading fire and burning snow where nature had just been reborn in terror. Far away, where the wind carried echoes, there might still have been a roar or just memory itself, refusing to fade from the storm. When the storm eased, the world returned to a white so blinding it hurt to look at. No more roars, no more smoke, only wind sweeping over the cracked veins of ice like giant wounds. He staggered through the ashen snow, the cold cutting through leather and flesh straight to bone. Each step sounded like breaking bones beneath his boots. Ahead, the warrior was kneeling, still gripping the haft of his axe, half his body covered in burnt black shards of ice. He rushed to him, dropping to his knees. The man's breathing was ragged, each inhale pushing blood from his chest, red against the snow. His dagger was still at his side. The wound wasn't from the beast, but from shrapnel when the ice burst, slicing him across the ribs. He tore off his cloak, pressed it against the wound, but the blood still seeped through his fingers, strangely warm. "Don't," the warrior rasped, eyes dim in the mist. "Don't waste it." He gripped his shoulder. "No. I can drag you. There's a station south, There is no south," the warrior interrupted, a crooked smile breaking through pain. "You know it. This storm isn't just here. It's everywhere. The ice has changed direction." Wind blew across them, tugging the frozen strands of his hair. He looked into the man's eyes, grey mixed with blue ash, the kind of light only the polar-born carried. "You kept your word," he said softly, voice shaking. "You put it to sleep." The warrior nodded faintly, breath growing shorter. "There's no you or me here," he whispered. "There's wind, fire, snow. We're just what's left." He couldn't answer, only held his hand tighter. The man raised his other hand, gripping his wrist. The leather cord tied there where the black stone hung had snapped, leaving only a shard still smeared with ash. "Take it," he said, barely more than a breath. "If you live, tell them I kept this winter warm." He shook his head, eyes burning from wind and snow. "I can't tell it without you." The warrior's broken laugh came out like smoke. "You will. The wind will speak for me. I trust it more than men." Then he squeezed his hand once, slowly fading, before his body grew still, eyes open, staring north toward the faint aurora flickering through grey clouds. He sat there for a long time, until the oil in the lamp died, until even the wind fell silent. The world was so quiet he could hear the blood drip onto the ice, freezing into tiny red beads. He closed the man's eyes, then dug a shallow grave in the ashen snow with the dead man's own knife covering him there. No marker, no prayer, only the leather strap and the black stone placed on his chest as the final sign. When he stood, the wind rose again, softly, like a sigh. He looked up. The aurora drifted slowly, its light weaving across the ice like threads of silver, the same shimmer he'd once seen in the beast's eyes. Maybe they weren't dead. Maybe winter was only sleeping, and now The warrior had become part of that dream. He turned away, shoulders trembling in the wind, the man's axe still in his grip. Every step sank deep, leaving tracks already fading under drifting snow. Behind him, the mound he'd made quivered once, then settled. Night fell. He pitched a tent of torn hide, lit a small fire, cut the last of his hard bread. The flame flickered over his face, pale blue, like a memory of wind. He thought of the warrior's final words, "Keep this winter warm," and realized it wasn't pride. It was prayer. Winter, to them, was never the enemy. It was sacred, a force that devoured life only to preserve balance. To keep it warm was to become part of the offering. He didn't know how far he could still go, or how long this season would last. But that night, for the first time, he didn't feel cold. Maybe it was the fire. Maybe it was the warmth of someone who stayed behind. The wind still blew, carrying a strange sound, not a roar, not the hiss of snow. It was like someone stitching the earth back together, thread by thread, steady and gentle, like the rhythm of survival. He closed his eyes, letting the wind brush his face. And in that moment, he felt someone standing behind him. Not beast, not man, just the shadow of one who had fallen, still walking beside him, across the endless ice. The wind rose once more, sharp, like a farewell. Then it stilled, and he walked on, without looking back, leaving behind a smooth white mound, no name, no sign. But from that moment, winter was a little warmer. That night, when the storm was finally gone, the land fell into a strange kind of quiet. No more roars, no more thunder, only snow, falling one flake at a time, light as breath. He stood beside the mound of snow he had just built, holding the last surviving oil lamp. The small flame flickered, its light washing over his face, thin, weary, but with eyes wide open, as if afraid that with one blink, the memory of the man beneath the snow would vanish. He carved no name, set no stone. The warrior had said the wind would tell, so he left it all to the wind. Beneath the snow, the man was sleeping, part of the land now, as though he had never existed anywhere else but in wind and ice. He planted the lamp at the head of the mound. Its small flame cast a faint green circle across the frozen ground. Every time the wind passed, the flame bent, wavered, then straightened again like a steady breath, as if someone was still there, awake beside him. He sat down, leaning against a block of ice, saying nothing. All sound in the world seemed gone, swallowed, leaving only his heartbeat and the wind. But the longer he listened, the more he realized there was something else in the wind. It didn't howl, it didn't scream. It whispered, soft, like someone speaking. He tilted his head, listening closer. At first it was just a murmur, then clearer like a voice, distant, without a face. "Thank you." A sound as light as mist, brushing past his ear, then gone. He shivered, unsure if it was real or just the tricks of an exhausted mind. But then it came again, closer this time. "Thank you, for keeping me warm." He looked around, no one, only snow up to his knees. The lamp jumped once, flared brighter, then dimmed again. His chest grew heavy. Maybe the wind was playing tricks. Maybe it was just an echo of grief. But deep down, he knew it was real. The wind here wasn't just air. It remembered. It carried voices, breaths, words left unfinished. He nodded slightly, said nothing, only reached out and touched the passing current. Cold, but not biting anymore. The feeling was strange, like touching a hand through glass. A faint warmth, fragile enough to vanish the moment he pulled away. He stayed still, letting the wind move across his shoulders, through his hair, listening to each drift swirl around him, like an old friend telling stories. Maybe the man was speaking of his tribe, where the dead still talked with the wind, where souls didn't leave but became part of the storms, returning when the snow melted. He smiled faintly. Maybe the man was smiling too, somewhere in that endless white. The night stretched on, the oil lamp's flame growing weaker. He pulled off a glove, held out his hand to catch the falling snow. Each flake melted into water, then froze again. Over and over, like life itself melting, freezing, nothing ever truly lost. From inside his coat, he took out the small black stone the warrior once wore. It was cold now, heavy, its inner light gone. He placed it on the snow, beside the lamp. "You kept this winter warm," he whispered. "Now it's my turn to keep the promise." The wind passed again, and this time the lamp didn't move. Its flame stood still, as if someone was shielding it. On the snow's surface, tiny glimmers began to appear, small, pale blue sparks like fallen fragments of the aurora. They floated briefly, then faded, leaving a faint glow like smoke. The whole field of ice shimmered, not from moonlight, but from the snow itself glowing. He watched it, feeling something he couldn't name. Not fear, not sorrow, just peace. A deep, endless peace that made him forget the cold, gnawing at his hands. Maybe the wind was singing. Maybe the warrior had become part of the snow, the ice, the breath of the land itself. Or maybe he was just hearing his own echo, the voice of one who survived after the world stopped speaking. Whatever it was, he knew this night would never happen again. He lifted the lamp, looked at the tiny flame one last time, then blew it out. The wind fell silent. The snow stopped. A single, perfect stillness draped over everything, thick as cloth. He stood, pulled his cloak close, and walked away, leaving behind the smooth mound of snow, the black stone, and the faint shimmer of aurora that flared once, then vanished. In the dark, he heard the wind one last time, soft, distant, like a farewell from someone moving on. "Tell it!" And he walked without looking back, because now, the wind would carry his voice for him. That morning, the sky opened into a pale white, flat as a dull mirror. He kept walking, leaving behind the place where he had buried his old friend, following the direction of the shifting wind southward, though colder than ever. Beneath his boots, the ice cracked softly with each step, like walking on the earth's breath. After a while, he noticed something strange. The snow beneath him was no longer flat but rippling faintly, as if something vast and unmoving lay beneath, no longer alive but not gone either. He crouched, tapped the surface with his knife handle. The sound that came back wasn't hollow like natural ice, it was solid, ringing, metallic. His heart beat faster. He pulled out a small hammer and began to strike. The ice was thick, but after a few blows, the snow gave way to a sheen of dark greenish steel. Brushing away the powdery frost, he froze. Beneath his feet was a metal plate carved with patterns, ancient spirals, the shape of wind curling around a sword. This wasn't something of his time. He stood still, scanning the horizon. The snow mounds rising around him suddenly looked different too, even, too deliberate. Not hills, but domes, towers, ramparts swallowed by centuries of ice. A buried fortress lay beneath him. He lit his oil lamp, hung it on a cord, and carefully followed a crack downward. The entrance was a narrow slit, barely wide enough to squeeze through. The air inside was unlike the cold outside, heavier, dry, laced with the scent of rust and something older, like ash and bone dust. Every step echoed faintly, like the breath of something asleep. When his lamp reached further ahead, he stopped. A corridor stretched forward, its walls forged stone, fitted by hand and sealed beneath a clear layer of ice. Behind that ice were carvings, riders with spears, warriors kneeling before a frozen throne, and among them all the familiar emblem, a hunting bird with wings spread wide. He recognized it instantly. It was the same insignia the northern warrior had carried. But here, it wasn't a symbol. It was a crest of state. He moved closer, pressed his hand against the icy wall, peering through the frozen glass where figures stood in rows. Bodies entombed in ice, frozen as statues. Some still poised for battle, others kneeling, clutching their chests. Their faces, stripped of flesh, were stretched tight over bone, yet the eyes still seemed to stare, unblinking across time. He bowed his head, whispered, "The Keepers." His voice echoed down the corridor, like an answer from the past. He walked on until the hall widened into a grand chamber. There, in the middle of cracked stone, lay a massive form, the skeletal remains of an ice beast, the same kind they had fought, but 3 times the size. Its horns pierced the ceiling, its body bound in rusted chains. Around its feet lay dozens of bodies, all armoured in silver, all bearing the same insignia. Then he saw it, the thing that chilled him most. They hadn't died fighting. They had died kneeling, heads bowed toward the beast, as if in prayer. On the wall behind them, faint words were carved in the old tongue, nearly erased by time, but he could still make out a few. Keep the wind, keep the ice, keep the sleep. And then he understood. This wasn't a fortress built for defense. It was a tomb, a prison for something they couldn't kill, sealed with their own blood. He stepped closer, scanning the storage vaults lining the walls. Inside were crates of untouched weapons, swords, axes, spears, all etched with swirling wind motifs. He opened one small chest, expecting supplies, but inside were glass jars filled with black ash, sealed with wax. He lifted one. The ash inside glowed faintly, pulsing like embers. Some kind of energy? Or the remains of the beast itself? No explanation remained. He set it back down, brushing snow gently over it. Everything here seemed to be waiting to sleep again, or waiting for someone foolish enough to wake it. He looked up. Above him, the ice ceiling caught the aurora's light, scattering it into pale columns that fell upon the creature's skeleton. The beams shimmered like silver threads weaving between heaven and earth. His heartbeat quickened. A formless dread crawled through him. The wind outside funneled through cracks in the stone, singing low, almost human, less a howl than a lament, like a prayer left unfinished. He stepped back, extinguished the lamp, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. The aurora's faint glow spread through the hall, revealing something else. Beside the beast stood a slab of black iron, etched with ancient script. He couldn't read it, but he recognized the symbol in the center. It was the same as the black stone the warrior had given him. The same mark, the same legend. Everything was connected. The wind rose again, sharper now, carrying a chill so deep he felt it touch the back of his neck, like fingers. He backed away, not daring to turn. Something in this fortress was still awake. When he reached the narrow exit, daylight struck his face, blinding him. The wind caught his cloak, pushing him forward. He turned once. Looking back, the aurora still streamed through the crack, lighting the ruins below. And within that pale glow, he thought he saw a figure, standing, one hand resting on the beast's remains. He couldn't tell if it was real or just a trick of the light, but then the wind hummed, low and clear, like an old voice singing, "Do not wake the ice until the season is gone." Then silence returned. He clenched the black stone in his hand and walked on, carrying with him a question without an answer, and the feeling that this place wasn't built to bury what had died, but to imprison what was still alive. When he left the ice fortress, the sky had already turned grey. The wind swept along the long cracks, carrying a deep rumble that sounded like the breath of the past being stirred awake. He walked, but every step echoed, resounding deep below, as if someone was walking beside him. In his hand, the black stone was freezing cold, heavier than before, though it still looked as small as ever. He didn't know why he kept it, only that letting it go made his chest feel hollow, and holding it felt like carrying a silent voice that refused to fade. The wind grew stronger, and with it came strange sounds, not the natural cry of air, but the clash of metal, the neighing of horses, the distant shouts of men buried under snow. He stopped, turned, but no one was there. Only the endless white and the dark outline of the fortress fading into mist. Yet the sounds didn't stop. They spread around him, like the earth itself was telling its story. In his mind, images began to form, not dreams, not memory, but visions the wind forced into him. He saw a sky of fire, armies in shining armor charging across the frozen plains, blood spraying, freezing the instant it hit the ground. Then the great beasts like the one he had faced rose from the storm, dragging blizzards behind them, crushing both man and steel. He saw the warriors of the northern tribe, the keepers of the wind, kneeling around a great spire of ice, singing in the old tongue to seal the gate of wind, to imprison the monsters beneath the earth. They buried themselves as part of the ritual, and when their song ended, eternal winter fell over this land. He snapped awake, realizing he was kneeling in the snow, both hands gripping the stone. His breath came out in mist, his palms bleeding, he didn't know if from the cold or from the force that pulsed through the stone. The wind shifted, blowing from the south now, carrying a strange howl, not the cry of wolves, but the broken note of a battle horn. Every instinct in him screamed. Something was waking. He looked north, where the aurora trembled. The green light bled into red, then yellow, like blood swirling in the sky. The ground began to shake. Metal clinked beneath his feet. He knelt, brushed away the thin snow, and saw spears. Hundreds, thousands of spears driven into the earth, their rusted tips barely breaking the surface. This wasn't ground claimed by ice. It was a battlefield forgotten by time. And he understood now why the warrior had said, "The war never truly ended." They hadn't won. They had only closed the door and vanished with the curse. The polar wastes weren't just where storms passed through. They were a wound that never healed. And those who died here never left. He sat down, trembling, mind spinning beneath the weight of the echoes. Each gust carried a fragment of memory. Screams, prayers, laughter of the lost. The ice all around him felt alive, not with blood, but with remembrance. The sky turned red. In the distance, pillars of light rose from the ground, the light of souls. They drifted upward, brushed against each other, then faded, but not completely. They wove together, forming a shroud of colour that draped across the land. He saw shapes within that light: warriors, riders, the brothers of the man who had fallen beside him. They stood in ranks, silent, watching him. For a moment, he felt they weren't guarding to fight, but to wait. "Wait for what?" he whispered. The wind answered, low and cold. "For someone to remember." Everything flared bright. Before his eyes rose a tower of ice, the one northerners called the Pillar of Wind. From its peak stretched hundreds of massive chains, driven deep into the earth, binding something beneath. And every storm, every time the beasts awoke, those chains grew weaker. He remembered the warrior's final words: "If you live, tell them I kept winter warm." Now he understood it wasn't farewell. It was testament, the vow of the keepers. They had known the ice would crack again, the wind would lose its way, and someone would have to remain, to watch, so this winter wouldn't become the world's end. He lifted his gaze to the sky, the wind circling him, not cold anymore, but burning hot like fire. Everything spun. The snow rose, the ice split. The aurora tore the heavens apart with veins of red light. The broken horn sounded again, clearer now, closer, as if calling from beneath the earth. He closed his eyes. Amid the storm, he heard the warrior's voice, not hoarse anymore, but ringing like a song. "We are not dead. We only sleep until someone remembers the vow." When he opened his eyes, the sky was calm again. The light softened, snow drifted slowly, each flake shining like silver ash. The wind shifted northward, the direction of the keepers. He rose. The black stone in his hand glowed faintly now, weightless. Beneath the ice, he saw countless figures fading, merging with the land, the air, the wind itself. And as he walked, he knew the war had never ended. It had only changed its shape, hidden in the storm, in the snow, in the memory of the living. And now, he was the last one who remembered. He left the frozen lands before the sun could rise. A faint halo behind the pale grey clouds was the only thing that reminded him daylight still existed. The world seemed to have fallen back asleep after the awakening of its past, silent, but not peaceful. He walked slowly, each step sinking deep into the thick snow, only for the wind to erase his trail moments later. The road no longer had any signs to cling to, only the south, where the weakest light of the aurora still stretched across the horizon, was the direction he chose. In his coat pocket, the black stone had cooled, yet when he touched it, he still felt a faint pulse, like a breath left behind. At his side, the warrior's oil lamp, the last one, was wrapped tight in cloth. The flame inside was just a small dot, fragile, but alive. He knew he wasn't carrying it to light his path. He carried it to remember. The snow lay heavy, the sky windless, and that stillness made everything heavier. Each time he stopped, his breath sounded loud as a heartbeat. The world was now only him, the white, and the memories still warm with blood. He didn't look back. No one told him to, and there was no one left to wait. Yet in his chest, the image of the warrior, the blue fire burning in the storm, and that final line, "Tell them I kept winter warm," kept returning, clearer than the wind itself. Sometimes he thought he heard footsteps behind him, steady, heavy, like those of someone wearing armor. He turned, but there was nothing, only snow falling, melting in the air before touching the ground. He smiled faintly, said nothing, and kept walking. Every time he opened his ration bag, he split the food in two, setting half on a nearby rock. Not because he believed the dead would eat, but because of habit, because it felt like there were still two of them traveling together. When night came, he stopped beneath a cliff. Darkness fell, and snow came down so thick that even the oil lamp's light was nearly smothered. He opened it, adjusted the wick, breathed gently to keep the flame alive. The pale blue glow reflected on his face, older, harder, eyes clouded with ash. He set the lamp in front of him, watching it like something still breathing. In that moment, he remembered the first cold night he ever spent in the storm. He had lit a fire then, sat still, and listened to the wind speak. But now, the wind was silent. No laments, no gratitude, only silence so deep it felt like he was sitting at the border between two worlds. One of snow, one of ash. He pulled from his pocket the worn map he had found in the abandoned cabin. The lines were almost gone, but he could still make out the mark of the road of eternal ice, the place where he had met the warrior. With a piece of charcoal, he marked where he stood, then folded it carefully and tucked it inside his coat. Maybe he'd return south. Maybe he wouldn't. But if someone ever found the map, they'd know someone had passed this way. As night stretched on, the aurora changed color. No longer green, but red and white mixed, like fire under water. He knew he was leaving the land of the keepers behind. Yet strangely, he didn't feel empty. Somewhere behind him, he could feel thousands of eyes watching, not with sorrow, but with acceptance. The wind shifted, for the first time in days, blowing against his back gentle, like a farewell push. He understood. It was goodbye. The oil lamp flickered once, then burned brighter. He stood, brushed snow from his shoulders, and kept walking. Beneath his feet the ice grew smooth and clear enough that he could see his reflection. But what was strange was he wasn't alone. There was another shadow beside his, faint, smaller, walking next to him. He stared for a long moment, then simply nodded. No words were needed. The next morning the sun rose for the first time in weeks. Its light was faint but real. He raised his hand to shield his eyes, feeling warmth on his skin, not the warmth of fire, but of something human. He took out the lamp. The oil was nearly gone. He opened the lid, looked at the tiny blue flame and whispered, "It's time." He set it on the snow, leaned close, and blew softly. The flame wavered, trembled, then went out. In that instant, a breath of warmth spread around him, melting the snow into droplets that fell at his feet. Only for a few seconds, then they froze again, turning into small, crystal-like beads. He picked one up, held it in his palm, and closed his hand. "I will tell," he said quietly. Not with words, but with footsteps. Then he walked on, leaving behind the empty lamp, its glass catching the last glint of aurora from the night before. The wind rose again, carrying a faint murmur, but this time it wasn't cold. It only whispered, soft as breath, long as memory. "Keep walking, child of the wind." He didn't look back. Across the endless white, 2 lines of footprints stretched far into the distance, until they vanished where sky and earth became one. They say that the frozen land there was never the same again. The storm still raged, the wind still howled, but the snow was no longer cold enough to kill a breath. The northern hunters said that on certain nights, when the moon was swallowed by white clouds, they saw a figure walking through the wind. A man with a small lamp strapped to his back, its blue light flickering like the eyes of a beast. He walked slowly, steadily, each step sinking deep into the snow, but he never seemed to stop. When they tried to get closer, all they heard was the wind changing direction, and where that shadow passed, the snow melted in a narrow line, revealing ice as clear as glass. The elders said it was the spirit of the one who walks with the wind, a merchant, or perhaps a lost warrior, the man who once carried the lamp of the north and brought it to the south, so that the world would never lose its last warmth. The children called him the lamp bearer. Some believed that if you prayed during a storm, he would pass by and leave you a small stone cold, but never frozen, a gift from the wind. No one dared to say whether he was man or ghost, But everyone knew this. Whenever a storm was about to come, the wind always changed direction the night before, and the air carried a different scent, something like ash, like smoke, but gentle. People said it was the sign that he was passing through, clearing the way for the storm, keeping it from tearing the world apart. Some swore they had seen him with their own eyes. A man in a dark leather cloak, his back bent under the weight of the lamp, his hood hiding his face. The light from his lamp reflected on the snow, stretching into a long green trail like a river of light. They said he never left handprints, only footprints, and when the wind passed, those too vanished, as if he had never existed. Some claimed he was the last southerner, the one who carried messages between tribes before disappearing into the storm. Others believed he was the spirit of a northern warrior, the one who fell so winter wouldn't become the end of the world. But whoever he was, the legend always kept one truth. He walks with the wind, not to find his way, but to guard the border between the world of men and the world of ice. The elders said the lamp on his back wasn't an ordinary lamp, but the last oil light of mankind, holding the breath of the one who gave his life to keep winter warm. When that flame goes out, winter will return to its beginning so white that even souls would turn to ash. In the scattered outposts across the frozen lands, people still place a small lamp by their doors, though they never light it. No one tells them to, they just do. They believe that if the lamp-bearer passes and sees the light, he'll know someone still lives there and will blow a soft wind to guide the storm away. Sometimes, in the morning after a blizzard, they find the snow before their doors disturbed, revealing thin streaks of grey ash glinting under the sunlight. No one can explain it, but those houses almost never collapse. The nomads of the East tell a different version. They say someone once saw him not walking alone. There was another figure behind him, smaller, lighter, the shape of a woman in white, always a few steps away. They never spoke, just walked one before, one after, silent as two pieces of wind. A child once asked, "If he's a spirit, why does he still walk?" The elder smiled and said, "Because some souls are not allowed to stop, not until winter learns how to be warm." Those words were passed down through generations, woven into the songs of reindeer herders and the lullabies whispered by firesides. Every storm season, when the wind slips through the cracks of doors, people still hear something that sounds like footsteps passing, slow, steady, even, neither near nor far. Some say it's just the snow falling, but those who've truly listened all swear the same. It's the sound of the one who walks with the wind, the being who left the world of men but still carries the duty of the living. Northern storytellers end the tale with a line no one fully understands. The lamp-bearer doesn't light the way for himself. He lights it so winter won't lose its path. And when they finish, the wind always rises, softly, just enough to lift the ashes into the air like light. Then everyone knows he's still there, still walking, still watching, still keeping. Winter has not ended, because he has not stopped. And so, you see, the story of the one who walks with the wind ends there. But in truth, it never really had an ending, because the wind in the polar lands never stops, and those who have ever heard it know every breath of the wind is a fragment of memory that never died. I tell it now, sitting in a small room, while outside, the snow still falls. Not real snow, just a layer of cold ash drifting from an old cloud, falling silently, like the breath of a soul still wandering somewhere out there. The lamp on my table, do you see it too? It has that faint blue glow like the light they say the one who walks with the wind carries on his back. It flickers whenever I speak his name, as if some part of the story is still alive, still listening. I tell it not for you to believe but to ask, because sometimes stories aren't meant to answer. They are meant to open a door between man and the things we've forgotten. Have you ever seen snow? When the wind rises, snow isn't just white flakes, it's tiny shards of memory. The breath of those who've gone, pieces of old promises. And if you stand in that whiteness, with no direction, no sound, only your heart beating, you'll hear yourself, or maybe someone else, walking beside you, even if you can't see them. They say that when the wind screams the loudest, in the heart of the blizzard, there are two sounds within it. One is the fear of the living, the other, the voices of souls that never stopped. And when I hear them blend together, I can't tell which is my breath, and which is the wind's. Because maybe they've always been one. Maybe those of us sitting in warm rooms, by a small yellow light, thinking we're safe from the storm, are also walking through a different kind of wind, a different kind of snow, just thinner, that's all. I tell the story of the lamp bearer, not to frighten you, but to make you understand. Everyone, somewhere in their life, must walk through their own winter. Some keep walking to find warmth, some stop to keep others alive. And no one truly knows which to move, or to stay lets us remain human longer. I don't know when you're hearing this. Maybe late at night, when the city's asleep, or maybe at dawn, when the sun hasn't yet burned away the mist. But imagine this. One day, you wake up, look out your window, and see snow falling, not a few lost flakes, but a world turned white. What would you do? Would you walk to find a place with light? Or would you light a small lamp and keep it burning until the wind stops? The lamp bearer chose to walk, and because of that, winter still exists. But if he had chosen to stay, maybe that winter would have ended, and the world would be neither cold nor remembering. Ironic, isn't it? We live because of those who stopped, but only tell stories about those who kept going. I tell this far, and hear the wind shift outside the window. Perhaps, somewhere, he's passing by. I can't see him, but the blue flame trembles. Maybe he hears the question I'm about to ask you now. If it were you, in this white world, would you walk to live, or stay to keep the winter warm? Think carefully, because maybe that choice doesn't belong to some distant day. Maybe it's right here tonight, when you turn off the light, look into the dark of your room, and hear the wind whisper outside your window. Because the wind doesn't only blow out there, it always finds its way in, seeking the smallest flame. Just like now, I'm speaking, and you're listening. I am here, in the wind, in the snow, in a story not truly ended. And you, somewhere out there, may be holding a bit of warmth from the lamp without even realizing it. So before the story closes, I want you to do one thing. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, listen to the wind outside, and imagine it saying, "This winter still needs someone to keep the fire." Maybe that someone is you, maybe it's someone else. But when you open your eyes and see the light, even if small, remember, no warmth is ever meaningless. And maybe, in that moment, you'll understand why I told this story. Not to tell you about the one who walks with the wind, but to ask you, do you have the courage to become part of it? The wind is still blowing, the snow is still falling, the lamp still flickers. And now, the story is yours. If you're still here, it means your heart is beating in rhythm with the stories of the night. Hit subscribe and walk with me into the next journey where every shadow hides a secret waiting to be awakened. And now, dim the lights, let your mind unwind, and let sleep carry you away. Sleep peacefully, for tonight, the world is still whispering.